Brilliant. Well, good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. It's lovely to be with you. It's been a blessing just to be part of what's happened already this morning. And we trust that God will help us all. I'm not an expert in anything, really. But as you can tell from the numbers I've already quoted, I've been around a little while. And one or two of you have as well. You've walked some of that journey with me, and it's good to see old friends this morning. Try not to look too much at Colin over there. But we're all on this pathway of learning every day. And sometimes we tend to think, well, it's the leaders who have all the answers. Those who are sort of in authority over us, God uses those to... But no, I think the Bible's very clear, isn't it? That God uses the leadership, he uses all of the gifts that are given in leadership to prepare the saints. Saints, we used the phrase earlier. Wonderful to be considered as one of the saints in God's eyes. To prepare the saints for acts of service. So it isn't Jonathan who does everything. And I know you don't treat him like that anyway. Or the other elders or the other teachers or the other leaders in the church. It's we, it's us, it's we ourselves. We are the ones who are where the rubber meets the road. So that's the kind of experience, really, that I have. I've been involved in the printing industry in various guises for a number of years. I have a dozen or so colleagues. We have several thousand customers, actually. And so there are lots of people to talk to have relationship with, to be a part of. Hello. And it's good from that point of view. A question for you. What do you wear to work? And another question straight away while you think about it. How many of you do work now at this moment in time? How many of you are still at work? Okay. Brilliant. That's good. How many of you did work? Okay. And you're thinking, well, we can have a rest this morning because it's workplace. You're not having a rest, I guess, in retirement because most people I meet say they're busier now than they were when they were at work. So you're occupied. If you're occupied, you have various occupations, and God can use you in that. So you're not excluded if you're retired. Why should you be? You have more experience than everybody else, for starters. But what do you wear, or what did you wear for work? Might seem a strange question, but I guess we all had different work clothes. Some of you may have worn a uniform. Perhaps you had to wear all of this PPE that we hear about these days, personal protective equipment. Maybe it's a suit or corporate clothing. I nearly wore my Gipping Press shirt today, and then I didn't think that was appropriate. I guess in the last couple of years, with the world changing as it does, some of you may even wear your pajamas. That's fine. Perhaps the top half should look a little bit more professional if you're on screen, but this series, Life on Mission, and hopefully this will work. We're looking today at mission in the workplace. And I wanted us to just sow that seed about what we wear to work. Now, clearly, I'm not talking about the physical clothes. You're all very smart here this morning. I suggest it's the same during the week. But it's the spiritual aspect. It's how we're dressed on the inside. That's something that comes out of this passage, this chapter that Jonathan read to us, and something I want us to look at very simply together this morning. Just going to bring out some overarching ideas, and then we're going to watch a little video together where a chap can kind of succinctly explain a bit more about mission in the workplace than I can. What I don't want you to do, and I don't want to do it myself, is to relegate our work to the second division of our Christian life. So we get to the point where we think, well, what we're doing here this morning is wonderful and fantastic. And it is. It's an opportunity to worship God together, to enjoy fellowship together, to have communion together, and to prepare ourselves for what comes in the next 5 days. But how many hours a week do you spend together here? How many hours a week do you spend at work or busy with other people doing other things. And surely that lion's share of time is what is important to God. How many people do you meet in the course of work? Some of you may work on your own, but many of you will have all sorts of relationships. So it's interesting. A little exercise for you. I haven't got anything on the screen, but get a piece of paper when you get home. Sit down and think. We did this last year at Chiltern Hall Community Church. Not necessarily for work, but in all the different aspects of relationship that we had. So family, friends, neighbours, school if you're there, college if you're there, university, and work. And write down how many people you may have an encounter with in the course of a week. I don't know, if I'm unusual, there's 115 people that I felt I met regularly every week through church, work, playing football, he still tries to do badly, and all of the family relationships and everything else. That's a lot of people, isn't it, to be in contact with as an ambassador for Christ. And the influence you can have as a Christian at work is huge. Possibly the biggest impact you can have outside of your own close family. People are watching you if they know you're a Christian. I hope and trust that we all are trusting in Jesus this morning. I should never assume that we are. I don't know you, all of you, many of you, to be honest. I am talking to you as one Christian to another this morning. If you haven't put your faith and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ, He has done everything He can for you, and He is calling you. And that's all I will say to you this morning. He is calling you and telling you inside that He wants you to commit your life to Him. But if you've done that, then you are being watched. Unless your Christian life is entirely a secret to everybody out there, you're being watched. Is that true? And you're being watched not just by those people who you encounter, but also by God Himself. Now, we're called by our Master Himself to be salt and light. I'm not going to say too much about that this morning, except to say that that is all about influence. It's about your sphere of Christian influence, that you can change things as God is changing you. That there are situations and circumstances that are unhelpful in the world, box jellyfish situations, we shall say, that can be changed and that you can have an influence on. And the power of Christian influence and the potential of it is huge, even in this culture in which we are a part. And because of the culture that we're a part of, there are so few places you can go to for that kind of certainty and guidance and strength and power that comes from being close to God. So, what do you wear for work? A few different examples up there. I'm not sure about the sailor, to be honest. I don't know if any sailor would ever really look like that. So we'll move on fairly quickly. Now, our Bible base here is the cluster of verses that come at the end of Colossians chapter 3 under the subject heading in the NIV of slaves and masters. Now, the world has changed, and we thank God that the world has changed, but you may feel that one of those descriptions fits you well. Hopefully you don't feel like you're enslaved to what you do from in the middle part of the week. It's much more helpful for us to think about those words, I think, in terms of employer and employee, and think about how that actually works. But there are some kind of key chains or key links in the chain that Paul, as he writes to this church in Colossae, is actually encouraging us to look at before we home in on how we live, how we become those who have that influence. And we start with our Master, because that's what he does after he's given thanks for the people he's writing to. He deals first and foremost in this letter with the supremacy of Christ. Jesus is supreme. There's no one else like him. No one else like him in history, in eternity, in any of the spiritual realms in the universe. There is no one else like him. And so supreme too is not only who he is, which is more than enough for us, but also everything he does and he has done. So that's where Paul starts. The first person to look at is Jesus himself. And we have this phrase in chapter 2 and verse 9, for in Christ all the fullness of the deity of God lives in bodily form. And then it goes on to say this, and you have been given fullness in Christ, who is the head over all. So here is Jesus, and we know about him. But all the fullness of who he is and what he does is with you tomorrow. When you go to do whatever it is you do, all of that person and work of Jesus goes with you. I find that absolutely astounding. I don't know how you feel about that. It's not about us, is it? It's about him and all that potential, and he goes with us. Now, we're also encouraged as we race through this letter, first and foremost, to take certain things off. And this is quite sensible and practical advice for us in so many areas of life. But I struggle with it sometimes. I heard a story earlier this week. I love Wimbledon, so I was listening to Radio 5 Live. Laura Robson, who used to play tennis, was talking about embarrassing moments, and she said the one she could remember was when she got up early and she thought, well, I've got other things I need to do first, so I'll put my tennis training stuff on over my pajamas, and then later I'll get ready to go and play my match. And she forgot to change. So she turned up at a match, took off the tracksuit, and she'd still got her pajamas on underneath. And there are days when we're all feeling like that. We're not prepared. We haven't prepared in the right way. We're not clothed in the right way. And the old person can show through. So there are things that we're told to take off. In chapter 3, verses 1 through to 9 of Colossians, Paul draws up these lists. Now, don't forget, he's not necessarily talking first and foremost to a group of people in work. He's talking to a group of Christians who are covenanted together as church. So there's a lot here that relates to the relationship, one with another, brother and sister, that relationship in turn with our Master Jesus, how that works, our worship, looking at what is important to him, not what is important to us. But of course, all of that in itself comes down to that issue of what you do when you're at work. It's a part of our everyday existence. I'm not going to dwell on this list. If you want to read and see and ask God, are there any of the things in this list here, particularly from verse 5 and onwards in chapter 3 of Colossians, that I am struggling with? Come before God, be honest with him. If you've got somebody here that you know and trust, that you can come before and say, right, I'm struggling with this issue, this old piece of clothing that I cannot take off. I know they will help you with it. It needs to be somebody you trust, somebody who you know will be discreet. But there are things we need to take off. And then there are things that we as Christians need to put on. Now, God helps us with that. He's literally, to continue this kind of description, he is handing us, Jesus is handing us the new garments that we need to be wearing, our new work clothes, our new life clothes. Because they're his characteristics. And our new self, when we're trusting in him, should be evident in every part of our lives. And particularly as we come to the end of this chapter and the opening verse of the following chapter, in our daily work. Now, you are aware, aren't you, that God is intensely interested in your Monday through to Saturday. I think in some ways even more than he's interested in your Sunday. I don't need to say that again, do I? That's where he wants you to be implementing, to be witnessing, to be serving, to be wearing everything that he has handed you when you've been together today. That is the area of service. There are just a few things I want to look at now in terms of the workplace. There are far more things I could have said. Time doesn't allow. And you'll see when we watch this video where I got the headings from. It doesn't give any more than the headings. So I had to do the rest myself. But I found them incredibly helpful. And the first one is this, that when we're in our workplace, we are a model of Jesus Christ himself. We should be. How is that going? If you're like me, there'll be days when you're better at that than others. And every day we need to ask him to come and renew us and refill us and go with us and be with us. By his Spirit, he will be very gracious in doing that. Now remind yourself again who he is, this supreme, wonderful master. He is the image, it tells us in the opening chapters, of the invisible God. He's the creator of all things, everything. He's the head over every power and authority. That helps me when I look at the messes that are made in the name of power and authority. That above all kingdoms and above all thrones, there is this supreme, wonderful master of ours. He's the new life giver. If you're struggling with aspects of that new life, that regeneration, then come to him and tell him, because he is just waiting to help you with that. Maybe the problem is often that we haven't confessed or asked that he help us in a particular area of our life. So we put on smart suit for him, metaphorically, and we put on our old grubby socks. Do we need to deal with that issue? Just get him to help us with whatever it is that we're putting on that is holding back our witness. Now, we are the model of Christ, but before we get ideas above our station and think, well, it gives me supreme power then in the workplace, I'll tell them what to do. I'll put them straight. You wouldn't be like that anyway, would you? I can tell by the looks on your faces you're much more like him, hopefully. And what is he like? Well, there's a list of the things we put on that really sums up his character. And I love it. But without prejudice. Inclusive. That was what my master was like, wasn't he? He went to the places other people wouldn't go. He talked to the people other people wouldn't talk to. He defied all of the cultural rules and regulations of the time. Even as a rabbi, he did what shouldn't be done. But it should have been done because it was on God's heart. He was compassionate. Does that describe you in your weekly work? He was kind. He was humble. He was gentle. He was patient. He is forgiving. He shows unconditional love that unites and builds us up. And he brings peace. And he is a peacemaker. Isn't he? And all of that he wants us to model in our workplace. And it isn't easy. So you will need his help every moment of every day. I get to my desk and I get ready for the day and everything's fine and I've prayed and I've got my lunch and I've got everything else and everybody's where they should be, and then bang, the phone call or the problem or the person comes, and that's where we need to be a model of Christ. This has gone wrong. Or even you haven't got this right. How do we respond? We should also be those who in our workplace have a ministry of Christ. Now, please understand me. This is me. This is how I feel. You may have a different opinion, but this is not about being preachy, is it? I don't think so. I really don't. But to be faithful in our work, or if we're a boss and God has given you that privilege, in the earthly sense, you're at the top of that pyramid, then you have responsibilities too. And the first verse of chapter 4 puts the spotlight on you and says, be fair. Be helpful to those who work for you. And in doing that, we can make an impact. When I first joined Gipping Press, my history was well known to my boss because I'd actually been a customer of theirs for the 12 years before I went to work for them. And I can't remember if it was day 2 or 3, but in the evening when everybody else had gone home, he came to me and he said, I have not employed a chaplain. And I understand what the rest of your life is all about, but here you are employed to work in this set capacity, and that's as far as it goes. That was telling me straight, wasn't it? 14 years I've been there. And I can remember the evening where he came and told me that his wife had been diagnosed with myeloma. He was willing to share that evening. When she passed away, and he just couldn't cope with it, and you can understand that he couldn't cope with everything that running this business brought. We stepped in to do everything we could. My wife, who doesn't work for the business, she came and helped me, and we were there 70, 80 hours a week. I'm not saying this for any praise for myself. It is what I was motivated to do because it was the right thing to do, because he needed that help, even though he didn't think he needed a chaplain. It was in the carrying of that business that the biggest bond of trust was brought to bear. He's not saved. I pray regularly that he and my other colleagues will be. And his son particularly has asked lots of questions and come much closer to God over the last 2 years. I love those questions. Johnny, here's one for you. How do you feel about this? I know a spiritual conversation is in the making, and just share. Not preach, just share. That's a ministry for Christ in the workplace. Mouthpiece of Christ. 1 Peter 3 verse 15 says this. I love this verse. First of all, it says, but in your heart set apart Christ as Lord. What a foundation is that? That's a limpet foundation rather than a box jellyfish foundation. Set apart Christ as Lord in your hearts. But then it goes on to say, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. I'm going to tell you, Sonny Jim, what I learned in church yesterday may not be the best start for a conversation. Asking someone how they are, telling them if they're in difficulty that you will pray for them, and being ready to give an answer to anyone who asks in that context. What makes you tick is a fantastic opportunity to be a mouthpiece of Christ. And he promised, didn't he? I don't think it's just, when you're hauled up before the Sanhedrin, but wherever you are in life, if you've got something he wants you to say, he'll give you the words if you trust him. And the last thing here is a moulder of culture. You can be a moulder of the culture of the business that you're in. Integrity, honesty, sincerity, genuineness, gentleness, selfless service and sacrifice are not often in evidence today, are they? And they're not signs of weakness, just in case you think, well, that just leaves me open to be pushed around. They're signs of strength. Honesty is, I don't get everything right on the subject of honesty, but I made it something that was going to be very important to me. Even to the point of pointing out when people are being dishonest, because it's so easy when the customer rings up in our trade, is my job ready, to just come up with a little white lie. But then you've got to remember it, and the process goes on because, you tell somebody something else. Surely it's better just to be honest. Sorry, we haven't had a chance to do it yet. Of course it's ready, we always say. It was ready yesterday. We forgot to ring you. Sorry. But, all of these issues are sadly lacking in so many places where we look to for an example. And they shouldn't be in the people of God. And if they are, and some days in me, they're not as prevalent as they should be, then I need his help to keep pouring his personality, his character, put his clothes on me. With God's help, you can demonstrate these things in your workplace. Or if it's not your workplace, in your golf club, or your bowls club, or your art club. Or when you're sitting with your family for a family barbecue. Or with the community around. It's all interchangeable. It will help with all of the aspects you're looking at in this series. To take off what is unhelpful, to put on, to clothe yourself with these characteristics which ultimately come from Jesus himself. And to be distinctive. To be distinctive. Doesn't take much. This morning I sat in our garden, which is double the size it normally would be because the fence is down. And I sat, and I think probably about 25, 30 metres away, I saw a flash of colour. And on the fence, right across on the other side of George's garden, the most beautiful little butterfly had landed on the fence. And it caught my eye. And just this point about being distinctive for Christ, just a flash of colour. If you can achieve that this week, who knows? Well, he knows how he can use that for you. We're going to finish by watching a video, Mark Green, from an organisation called LICC, the London Institute of Contemporary Christianity, which I think you will find helpful. And it's also where these headings came from. And on their website, it makes this statement. I'm going to leave you to think about it. Well, I have got one more thing there. This is not a Christian quote. Thomas Edison said, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work." I thought that was quite good. Yeah. Because you can put a spiritual focus on that. And this is what it says on the LICC About Us page. With Christ, there is no ordinary. With Christ, every encounter, every task, every situation brims with divine possibility. Thank you for listening. Let's watch this video together.
This is Brettenham House, just 50 yards from the Thames, where I began my first job after leaving university, in the 4th largest advertising agency in the world. I was thrilled for 3 big reasons. 1, I had a job. 2, I not only